friends, so today we are going to start with class 10 biology chapter 1, that is life processes. By seeing the chapter's name itself, we can understand about what we are going to learn in this chapter. So yes, in this chapter we are going to learn about different life processes that keep on happening until we are alive. So let's start. Firstly, tell me if it is easy to guess whether something is alive or it is not alive. If you say the criteria of moving, that living things move or anything that moves is alive, then the clouds also move in the air. So can we say that clouds are alive? No, we can't. We can say that living things breathe, something that respires is alive. But there are some animals who have the capability of not breathing for a long time. So can we say that they are non-living? No, we can't. So isn't it quite difficult to say whether something is living or non-living? As if one living thing would show a particular characteristic, but other may not show that. So we should elaborate this topic and find something more accurate. So for finding this, we take a few characteristic features of living things and non-living things by which we can classify them. So characteristic features of living things are like breathing, moving, excretion, responding to stimuli, that means sensation, reproduction, adapting a change, growth, eating, etc. And now characteristics of non-living things are like no excretion happens, no nutrition happens, no respiration happens, there is no growth, no reproduction happens, and there is no sensitivity among them. Now, before some time we saw an example of clouds that they also move, but still they are non-living. So, here the definition is that growth can take place in non-living things also. Non-living things can also move, but someone else does that. There's an external force or external person who does that. They can't move or they can't grow on their own. The best example that we gave is cloud and a car. Until we start it, it's not going to move on its own. So now let's begin with life processes. These life processes are important in order to identify differences between living and non-living things, and also to understand that what exactly takes place in our body every moment. These different life processes together make our body work and function properly. So we should know about them, right? There are main 8 life processes that happen in our body. 1. Nutrition. 2. Transportation. 3. Respiration. 4. Excretion. 5. Synthesis. 6. Growth. 7. Regulation. And 8. Reproduction. So in this chapter, you are only going to learn about the first 4 life processes, that is nutrition, respiration, transportation and excretion. These life processes together maintain our body, as I said, and the processes which together perform the maintenance job are called life processes. Okay? So now for performing various type of life processes, we need energy, right? So from where does this energy come? Now I'm not going to tell you detail about every process here because in this full chapter you are going to learn that. So let me just give you an overlook. When you hear nutrition, you understand that it includes something of intake of food or related to nutrients. Then when you hear of transportation, you understand that it is of transporting something in our body. Then when you hear about respiration, you know that it includes breathing. And when you hear about excretion, you know that it includes throwing out the waste materials in our body. You have just learned an overview of this in earlier classes. And in today's chapter, we are going to see every process in detail. So now let's start with nutrition. Nutrition is the process of taking food by an organism and its utilization by the body to build our body for growth or for repairing the damaged parts of our body or for producing energy. This was the definition of nutrition. So now nutrition in simple words means that intake of food, and that food will be used by the body for maybe for growth or for repairing some damaged parts of your body or maybe for making you more healthy or maybe for something else. But the food which we take in and it is used by the body, that is called the nutrition. Now nutrition are of 2 types, autotrophic nutrition and heterotrophic nutrition. And we can classify the organisms into autotrophs and heterotrophs by their mode of nutrition. So now let's see who are autotrophs or what is this autotrophic mode of nutrition. It is the mode of nutrition in which organisms prepare their own food by some inorganic substances like CO2, that means carbon dioxide, or H2O, that means water, in the presence of sunlight and chlorophyll. So in other words, we can say that autotrophs are the organisms who prepare their own food by using some substances like CO2, water, in the presence of sunlight and chlorophyll. The best example that is coming in your mind is plants, and yes, this is right. Plants are the best examples to give for this autotrophic mode of nutrition, but along with them we can give an example of some bacteria also. Now let's see what is this heterotrophic mode of nutrition. So this is a mode of nutrition in which organisms get their food directly or indirectly by plants. So these heterotrophs are dependent on plants both directly and indirectly. Hope you understood why are we using directly and indirectly. So okay, I'll tell. Directly because some herbivorous type of animals are there who directly consume the plants, but some animals the carnivorous or us humans who indirectly consume plants are also there. This is why they have told directly or indirectly. So some examples for heterotrophs are all the animals, fungi and some types of bacteria also. And we humans come under animals itself. Now in this heterotrophic mode of nutrition, there are three types. One is saprophytic, then is parasitic, and then holozoic. Now every one of this is really simple and you have learned it in earlier classes, but I think it's difficult to recall, so I'll tell you. In saprophytic mode of nutrition, organisms get their food from dead and decaying matter. These organisms, they break down the food materials outside their body and then they absorb the nutrients. Remember this point. Now the examples for these are mushrooms, bread mold, yeast and some kind of bacteria. Now in parasitic mode of nutrition, organisms get their food from another living organism called host without actually killing that organism. Now I'll give you an example of cuscuta, which is a plant, a yellow colored plant, which is a creeper. It climbs over another plant and it absorbs the nutrients from it without killing that plant. So I hope you have understood. Few other examples are like lice, liches, roundworms, bed bugs, etc. Now let's see holozoic mode of nutrition. In this, organisms take food directly and absorb it as whole. The best example is humans. How do we eat food? We just take a piece of it and we put it inside our mouth, and then in our body we break down it and we do the digestion process. So the food particles break down inside our body. The best example for these are we human beings, fishes, birds, amoeba and some animals. So now we are done with heterotrophs and heterotrophic mode of nutrition. Now we'll be studying in detail about how does this digestion process take place in our body later. Before that, let's see about the different types of nutrition in autotrophic mode of nutrition. Autotrophs are the organisms who can prepare their food by their own selves with the help of some inorganic substances like CO2, water in the presence of sunlight and chlorophyll. So in this autotrophic mode of nutrition also there are two types. One is photosynthesis and another one is chemosynthesis. So this chemosynthesis takes place in few bacteria, and in this chemosynthesis you don't need sunlight every time to make food. They have their own chemical enzymes because of which they can make their own food. But in this chapter we are not going to go in detail about chemosynthesis. Instead we are going to study about photosynthesis that occurs in plants. So photosynthesis is a process by which plants prepare food using CO2 and H2O in the presence of sunlight and chlorophyll. Food is prepared in this process and carbohydrates are released which give energy to the plant. Excess amount of food or the extra food that is made is stored in the form of starch in the plant body, and during this process an important gas is released. So can you tell me? Yes, very good. It is the oxygen gas that is released, and this is the chemical equation for the process of photosynthesis. Now let's see what are the main events that occur during this process of photosynthesis. So mainly three processes take place. One is that absorption of light energy by chlorophyll. Second is the conversion of light energy into chemical energy and splitting of water molecules into hydrogen and oxygen. Second process involves two sub-processes. One is conversion of this light energy which is absorbed by chlorophyll into the chemical energy, and second one is splitting of water molecules into hydrogen and oxygen. Now the third event that takes place is reduction of CO2 to form carbohydrates. Now learn these three events very thoroughly. And now we'll see the mechanism of chloroplast in which chlorophyll is present, and we'll see these three events in little more detail also. So as you studied in your lower classes that chloroplast is an plastid which is only present in plant cell which has chlorophyll in it. Now in this diagram you can see the structure of chloroplast. There is an outer membrane, an inner membrane, and there are thylakoids. This full pole-like structures are thylakoids, and each one of them, each plate in them is called granum. The semi-solid liquid which is present inside the chloroplast is called stroma. Actually what happens in this process of photosynthesis is that there are two different reactions that happen. One is light reaction and one is dark reaction. Now by the name itself you can understand that light reaction happens in the presence of sunlight and dark reaction can happen when there is absence of sunlight also. What happens in this light reaction phase is that these thylakoids, they absorb this sunlight from the environment or from the sun we can say. Then they release the electrons in them and then they get excited. These electrons or these thylakoids basically, they get excited and then these electron acceptors come and they accept these released electrons. And then after this light energy is converted into chemical energy and this chemical energy is released in the form of ATP and NADPH. Along with this, the oxygen molecules are split into hydrogen and water in this light reaction phase itself. So, the first two events that we saw take place in light reaction phase and the third event takes place in dark reaction phase. And the third event is reduction of CO2 into carbohydrates. So now we saw that this light reaction phase takes place in, and now this dark reaction takes place in stroma. This includes the reduction of CO2. Actually what happens here is that the CO2 or the carbon dioxide and hydrogen reacts with each other. This hydrogen, from where does it come? The splitting of water into hydrogen and oxygen takes place, right? From there, this hydrogen and this CO2 that the plant intakes, they react with each other and they form carbohydrates. And during this process of reaction of CO2 and hydrogen, energy is provided by ATP and NADPH. And this results in formation of carbohydrates or glucose.
So now the question comes, from where does this oxygen enter plants? And as you know, the answer is stomata. On the last layer of epithelial tissues, there are small pores present called stomata. And these tiny pores are guarded by guard cells. And these guard cells are parenchyma type of tissue. And they are responsible for regulating the size of stomata. As you can see in this picture, the guard cells, they have inner wall which is very thick and the outer wall which is thin. Now opening and closing of this guard cell depends on the turgor pressure. When the water pressure increases, then the cell swells up. As you know, when cell is kept in hypotonic solution, water goes into the cell and it swells up. So when the turgor pressure increases, the cell swells up due to more absorption of water, and because of this, the stomatal pore opens. And when there is a shrinkage of cell, then the pore closes. And when the pore opens, that time all the gases which the plants need, they take them in. I have put so many pictures throughout my explanation to make you understand more better, so please refer them. So now we have completed nutrition in autotrophs and heterotrophs we saw. Now we are going to start with nutrition in humans. But before going to that topic, we will see about nutrition in amoeba and nutrition in paramecium. So let's start with nutrition in unicellular organism, which is amoeba. It is a unicellular organism and it has no specialized organ for nutrition. It engulfs food by its false feet known as pseudopodia. Last year you had learned that this is also known as endocytosis. Then intercellular digestion takes place in a food vacuole. The digestion takes place. Then there the complex substances are broken into simple ones. Then the nutrients are absorbed and assimilated and the energy is given out. And then when these all processes are completed, the undigested food is removed by the process of egestion, which is known as exocytosis. So as you saw, amoeba didn't have any special organ, but it did its all functions by its one single cell, and its digestion, absorption, assimilation, these all processes took place in one single food vacuole. Now let's see about nutrition in Paramecium. Paramecium is also a unicellular organism, but the difference between amoeba and Paramecium is that amoeba can move the way it wants. It doesn't have a specific shape, but Paramecium cell has a definite shape. And so food has to come at a specific spot by which the Paramecium can eat it. But this will not happen every time, right? So there are cilia present on its entire surface. They are the hair-like projections. So what happens is that when a food particle comes nearby, these cilia, they push it towards a specific spot known as oral groove, from which the Paramecium takes in food. And then all other processes are same as the way in amoeba. Digestion takes place, nutrients are absorbed, assimilated, and energy is given out, and then finally it is ejected out. Now we come to nutrition in humans. So humans are not unicellular, they are multicellular organisms. They consist of specialized organs for nutrition. Different organs perform different functions, and these all organs together are called digestive system. And this digestive system has different glands and different organs, and together these different organs are called as alimentary canal. So what is this alimentary canal? It is a long tube from mouth, starting from our mouth to our anus. Now we are going to see the parts of alimentary canal. So these all things you might recollect, you have learned in your 7th standard. This full digestive system you have learned, but here we are going to learn in a little more advanced way. All the basic things are going to be covered again. Okay, see, I'll not tell you the parts first and then I'll tell you the structure, the function. So I'll tell you everything together. Parts, structure, their functions and their uses. So the first part in alimentary canal is our mouth. Mouth takes in food, which is known as ingestion. Here we have 32 teeth. Adults have 32 teeth. And these teeth chew the food and they break down the big substances into small substances. Then in mouth we have our tongue, which is responsible for tasting the food. Then we have a gland named as salivary gland in our mouth or in our buccal cavity, which secretes salivary amylase. And this saliva breaks down complex substances into simple substances, and it breaks down carbohydrates into simple sugars. It's not glucose, it's just simple sugars. So we say digestion starts in mouth itself, right? So why do we say this? The reason is pretty simple. In our mouth, when we start chewing the food, it mixes with saliva, and from there mechanical digestion starts. That means breaking down of complex substances into simple substances, and then chemical digestion also starts, which is breaking down of carbohydrates into simple sugars. So two type of digestion starts here, mechanical and chemical. And because digestion starts, yes, we can say that digestion starts in our mouth itself. Now esophagus, that means our food pipe, but it's not wise to say food pipe after coming in 10th. So we're going to say it as esophagus. It is a long muscular tube which pushes our food forward. It doesn't have any other gland, it doesn't have any other function. It every time does a rhythmic contraction, which is known as peristalsis. After the food is passed through esophagus, it enters stomach, which is a large hollow muscular organ. It expands when food is put into it or food gets into it, and there the food mixes with digestive juices. Now, which all digestive juices are present in our stomach? There's a gland known as gastric gland, which is present in the walls of our stomach. It secretes 3 different digestive juices. One is HCl, that is hydrochloric acid, which creates a acidic medium. It makes our food acidic, and then it kills the germs in our food also. Second thing that releases is pepsin. This pepsin breaks down our proteins into simple peptides. And the third thing it releases is mucus. This mucus protects the inner wall of stomach by the action of HCl, because we know that HCl is hydrochloric acid, and if acid is evolved there, then it would be very risky for us. So this mucus protects the inner wall of our stomach by the action of HCl. After the food is digested in stomach, or after the role play of stomach is over, the food is sent into small intestine. It is the longest part of our alimentary canal. It has 3 parts, and the top part which connects stomach to small intestine is called duodenum. And small intestine is such an organ which is fitted correctly in our body. Before knowing what happens here, we have a point to learn that herbivores need longer alimentary canal, or they need longer intestine. Why is this? Because they consume direct cellulose from the plants. Herbivorous means the organisms that eat only plants, and they consume direct cellulose, and this cellulose is very difficult to digest. But the carnivores, they feed on meat, so meat is far easy to digest by a smaller alimentary canal, so we don't need a longer one. Now there is a common question that there are few vegetarian people, and why don't they need longer alimentary canal? They are also eating just fruits and vegetables, right? So I'll clear it that vegetarian people do not go and eat the direct leaves of the plants. They cook it and they eat. So when they cook it, there is no content of cellulose in it further. And even if they consume some leafy plants in salad or something like that, it doesn't matter much because we don't consume it in very big number. Okay, so now let's see the function of small intestine. In a small intestine, our digestion gets completed. All about proteins, carbohydrates and fats. As I have told you, duodenum is a part rising from the stomach to small intestine, and there a pyloric sphincter muscle is present. Again, there a pyloric sphincter muscle is present, which is responsible for regulating the entry of food from stomach to intestine in small batches, because intestine at once, it is a small intestine, so at once it can't consume or digest or assimilate a longer or many big substances or a big amount of food. So it sends this pyloric sphincter muscle, it sends food into small batches in it. So now after the food enters small intestine, there are digestion enzymes that come from pancreas and liver into small intestine. So now quickly recall and tell me which juice pancreas secretes and liver secretes. They are pancreatic juice and bile juice respectively. So this bile juice is stored in gallbladder, as we know. And this bile juice is not very powerful juice or something, but it is very useful. We need it. So now what does it do? This bile juice emulsifies the fat. That means there's a big fat molecule. They break it into small fat molecules. And it also makes the food alkaline. Now why does it make the food alkaline? It makes the food alkaline because the pancreatic juices can only act on alkaline food. Then these pancreatic juices, they have trypsin and lipase in it. Trypsin is responsible for breaking down proteins into very small and very tiny molecules by which it is easy for the intestine to absorb it, and lipase is responsible for breaking down the emulsified fat molecules. That means they break down it into very tiny particles that it is so easy to absorb it quickly. So these pancreatic juices have trypsin and lipase. Now the inner wall of intestine also contains few digestive juices or intestinal juices, we call them. They also act in some different ways, but we are not going to study about them here. So now after all these juices act upon it, the carbohydrates are finally converted into glucose, proteins are finally converted into amino acids, and fats are finally converted into fatty acids and glycerol. And now these end products are absorbed by our body. Now this absorption takes place. Where does it take place? Yes, we had learned earlier that this absorption takes place in small intestine. In the inner wall of small intestine, there are few finger-like projections present. They are villi. They increase the surface area for absorption and they absorb the nutrients. These villi are highly supplied with blood vessels because when they absorb the nutrients, they send it to the blood vessels, and by this blood vessels, they transport the nutrients by blood into different body parts. So now as you can see here, this is lacteal, a blood vessel which is absorbing fatty acids and glycerol. And this is blood capillary which absorbs amino acids and glucose. Now here if you write that lacteal absorbs fats and blood capillary absorbs proteins and glucose, then proteins and carbohydrates, then you will get no mark because these carbohydrates are already converted into glucose, this protein are already converted into amino acids, and these fats are already converted into fatty acids and glycerol. So you have to compulsorily write the end products. Okay, so now once these nutrients are absorbed, this energy is used for growth and repair, and that process is known as assimilation. After that, the unabsorbed food is sent to large intestine, and here waters and salts are absorbed from it. Then comes the rectum. It is a distal part of large intestine and it terminates in anus. It gets end in anus, and rectum is temporary storage of all the feces. And then finally egestion takes place, which is removal of undigested waste materials from our body, and this takes place by anus. It is the opening where the alimentary canal ends. So that's all for today. We are here in this video, we were only going to cover about nutrition, and we have completely covered everything. And now I'm sure that you have understood everything, and in next video we'll be talking about respiration and followed by that. So till then, thank you, bye bye, and take care.